She came home late again, smelling like a fresh shower. Nothing odd about that, right? Except, it was 11:30 p.m., and she claimed she'd been at the office all night. Her excuse was perfectly rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. Big client, crazy deadline, you know how it is. I nodded, playing along like the fool I'd become. But there's something about the scent of soap on your wife's skin when she claims she's been buried in paperwork all evening that just doesn't sit right. Who showers at the office? I didn't say anything. I just smiled, asked if she wanted me to make her something to eat, like the good husband I've always been. She said no, of course, too tired, already ate. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she was going to bed, and disappeared upstairs. That's when I felt it, that tiny voice in the back of my head screaming at me that something was off. I didn't want to believe it, but my gut's never been wrong before. So, I waited. I waited until I heard her soft breathing from the bedroom, and then I did something I swore I'd never do. I grabbed her bag. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but there it was, tucked under her perfume and lip balm, like a little secret she thought she'd hidden so well. A hotel key card. My blood ran cold. We don't do hotels. I don't know why I didn't confront her that night. You'd think finding a hotel key card in your wife's bag would send you straight into a storm of questions, accusations, maybe even some shouting. But no, I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at that little piece of plastic, my mind running in circles. Every worst-case scenario was flooding my head, but none of them made sense. Maybe she had an explanation. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Or maybe I was just a goddamn idiot trying to give her the benefit of the doubt when every fiber of my being was screaming otherwise. My hands were shaking as I held that keycard, and I remember the weirdest detail: it was for room 407. Something about that specific number burned itself into my brain, like it had some kind of meaning I couldn't figure out yet. I thought about waking her up, about marching into the bedroom and shoving the card in her face, demanding answers. But I didn't. I just stared at it like it was a puzzle, like maybe if I looked hard enough, the truth would reveal itself without me having to make a scene. I ended up putting it back. Why? I don't even know. I guess part of me wanted more proof. I didn't want to blow up our marriage if this was some weird misunderstanding. Who knows, maybe she was using the hotel for work. People do weird things when they're stressed. But that damn shower scent, that stupid keycard, and her casual lie about eating dinner at the office all stuck with me. I couldn't shake it. So, I waited. And it's funny, in hindsight, how easy it is to start noticing things when you're actually paying attention. That next morning, she got up before me like she always does, acting like nothing had changed. She gave me her usual heading out early, crazy day ahead speech, kissed me on the forehead, and left. I watched her from the window, like I was watching a stranger, not my wife of 10 years. I knew I had to do something, so I started with her phone. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not the paranoid type. Before this, I'd never even thought about going through her stuff. But everything felt different now. I knew the passcode, she'd never bothered hiding it from me. I don't even think she imagined I'd ever look. Maybe that's where I screwed up. I trusted her too much, never thought twice about what she might be hiding. But her phone was clean. Too clean. No texts, no missed calls, nothing but work emails and a few harmless conversations with her friends. I scrolled through the history, looked at everything. But it was like she'd wiped it clean, like she knew I'd be suspicious and made sure there was nothing for me to find. That just made it worse. The more spotless it looked, the more it reeked of guilt. Then I remembered the hotel key card. Room 407. Maybe it was just a one-time thing, but maybe there'd be something else. I needed more. So, I went upstairs and searched her laptop. We shared a desktop, but she used her personal one for work stuff, and it was always in her office. At first, I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but I clicked through her email, scanned for anything weird. Again, nothing. But then I hit the goldmine, her calendar. I don't know why I hadn't thought of it before. She'd always been obsessive about planning everything, and it wasn't just work. She'd mark down dinners, yoga classes, even the odd get-together with her old college friends. It was all there, laid out in neat little boxes. And there it was, last Friday, client meeting, Hotel 407. My stomach twisted into a knot. It was right there, written in black and white. She'd booked herself a meeting in a goddamn hotel room. I didn't need a detective to tell me what that meant. Still, part of me held out hope, some shred of denial whispering that maybe there was some kind of logical explanation. But deep down, I knew what was going on. I felt like I was in one of those shitty crime dramas where the clueless husband finally stumbles on the truth, and it's right there in front of his face the whole time. Except this wasn't TV. This was my life. I had the proof now, but I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. I needed to be sure, needed to catch her in the act. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I decided to follow her. The next day, I made up some excuse about working late, kissed her goodbye, and waited until she left the house. I followed her. It wasn't even that hard. I kept my distance, watched her weave through traffic like it was any other day. But when she pulled into the parking lot of a hotel across town, my heart stopped. She wasn't at work. She wasn't meeting clients. She parked in the back, tucked her car between two SUVs like she didn't want to be seen. That's when I knew. All the excuses, all the late nights, it all fell into place. I sat there in my car, parked across the street, watching her walk into the hotel like she didn't have a care in the world. And I realized something. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was numb. The kind of numb you get when you've been holding your breath too long, waiting for something bad to happen. I was in shock. But I still needed to see it. I needed to know for sure. So, I waited. I don't even know how long I sat there, staring at the hotel entrance, waiting for her to come out. But after about an hour, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked in. The hotel lobby was your standard chain, nothing special. Generic carpet, low lighting, and a bored receptionist who didn't even glance up as I walked past. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor, my heart pounding in my chest. The whole way up, I kept telling myself that this was insane, that I was about to see something I couldn't unsee. But I couldn't stop myself. I reached room 407 and just stood there for a minute, my hand hovering over the door. I could hear muffled voices inside. Hers. And a man's. I felt like I was outside my own body, like I was watching someone else live this nightmare. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some kind of dramatic, movie-like moment where I kick the door in and find them in the middle of something. But I didn't have to. The door wasn't even fully closed. They were so wrapped up in whatever they were doing, they hadn't even bothered to shut it properly. I pushed it open, just a crack. And there she was, on the bed with him. Laughing, talking like they didn't have a care in the world. She wasn't even cheating like it was some dirty secret. She was doing it with a smile on her face, like this was normal for her. Like I didn't exist. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream or throw things or do any of the crazy stuff you see in the movies. I just stood there, watching. And something broke inside me. I closed the door quietly and walked out of the hotel, my mind blank. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even feel the anger yet. It was like my body hadn't caught up with what I'd just seen. I got in my car and drove home in a daze, the image of them on that bed burned into my brain. When I got home, the house felt different. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a place filled with lies, a place where I'd been living a fantasy. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, waiting for her to come back, wondering how the hell I was going to face her. Because now I had the proof. And there was no turning back. I sat in that empty house for what felt like hours, just staring at the front door, waiting for her to walk through it. My mind was racing, but my body didn't want to move. It's weird how in moments like this, you don't think about the big things. You'd expect your head to be filled with memories, regrets, or maybe plans for revenge. But no, all I could focus on was that hotel room. The laughter. Her face. The way she looked so normal, like this was just another day for her. The betrayal wasn't in the act itself, it was in the ease of it, the way she carried on like we didn't exist anymore. The sound of her keys in the lock snapped me out of my haze. I felt my entire body tense up as the door swung open and she stepped inside, tossing her bag on the floor like she always did. There was no hesitation in her. No guilt. She glanced at me sitting there on the couch, and for a brief second, her eyes flickered with something. Was it suspicion? Nerves? I couldn't tell. But it was gone as quickly as it came, and she gave me that same tired smile, the one she'd been using for months to keep up appearances. "Hey," she said, casually, like nothing had changed. "You're home early. Everything okay?" That was it. That one sentence. The absolute audacity of her acting like everything was fine, like I hadn't just seen her with another man in that hotel room. It was enough to snap whatever was holding me back. My hands clenched into fists, and I stood up slowly, trying to control the shaking in my voice. "Where were you?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. She blinked, clearly caught off guard by the question. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, that nervous tick she always had when she was lying. "I told you," she said, her voice a little too smooth, a little too rehearsed. "I had to stay late at the office. Big project, you know how it is." The sheer brazenness of her lie made my stomach turn. I couldn't do this. I wasn't going to play this game, pretend like I didn't know exactly where she had been. So, I did something I'd never done before. I called her bluff. "Stop lying, Jenna." Her whole demeanor shifted instantly. She went from tired, overworked wife to defensive in the blink of an eye. Her eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms over her chest like she was preparing for battle. "What are you talking about?" she shot back, her voice rising. "I'm not lying. Why are you acting like this?" "Acting like what?" I stepped closer to her, keeping my voice steady, even though my heart was hammering in my chest. "Like I don't know where you were tonight? Like I didn't follow you to that hotel?" The color drained from her face so fast I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She tried to recover, though, shaking her head and letting out this fake laugh that just made me angrier. "You're crazy," she said, but her voice was shaky now. "You followed me? What the hell is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" I snapped, my voice louder now. "What's wrong with me? You were in a hotel room with another man, Jenna. You've been lying to me for God knows how long, and you have the nerve to ask what's wrong with me?" Her mask cracked then. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt finally creeping through. She took a step back, her arms dropping to her sides, and for a moment, I thought she was going to admit it. I thought she'd finally tell me the truth. But no. Instead, she doubled down. "You don't understand," she said, her voice desperate now. "It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Not what I think. I saw you, Jenna. I saw you with him. I followed you to that hotel, I watched you walk into that room. Don't you dare stand here and tell me it's not what I think." She looked like she was about to cry, but I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I wasn't falling for the tears, for the excuses. Not after what I'd seen. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice harsh. "How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, staring at me like she was trying to figure out what to say next. Like she was still weighing her options, still trying to control the situation. It made me sick to my stomach. Even now, even after being caught, she was trying to find a way out. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "It's not serious, okay? It's just... I don't know. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, my anger boiling over. "You think this is complicated? You think fucking some guy behind my back is complicated?" She flinched at that, but I didn't care. I wasn't holding back anymore. She had to feel it. She had to know what this was doing to me. She started, but I cut her off. How long, Jenna? How long has this been going on? She hesitated, and I could see the war in her eyes. She wanted to lie. She wanted to make this easier on herself, but she couldn't. Not anymore. She knew I wouldn't believe her, so she finally told me the truth. 6 months, she whispered, looking down at the floor. 6 months. Half a year. I felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my head was spinning. 6 months of lies. 6 months of her sneaking around, pretending everything was fine while she was fucking someone else behind my back. Who is he? I asked again, my voice hoarse now. She shook her head. It doesn't matter. He's no one. No one? I shouted. He's not no one, Jenna. He's the guy you've been sleeping with for half a year. Who the hell is he? She still wouldn't look at me. She just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, like she was trying to disappear. It's just a guy from work, she muttered. It's nothing serious. That word again. Nothing. Like this was all some meaningless fling, like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt this rage building inside me, this overwhelming urge to throw something, to hit something. But I didn't. I just clenched my fists and took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. I needed to stay in control, needed to think clearly, even though my entire world was crumbling around me. So that's it? I asked, my voice cold now. You've just been fucking some guy from work, and it's nothing serious? She didn't answer. She just stood there, silent, refusing to meet my eyes. I took a step closer to her, and she finally looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not this time. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why did you do this? Why did you cheat on me? She sobbed then, the guilt finally catching up with her. I don't know, she cried. I don't know, okay? I was lonely. You're never here. You're always working, and I don't know, I made a mistake. A mistake? I repeated, my voice shaking. 6 months of sneaking around, lying to my face, cheating on me, that's a mistake? I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice hollow. You did hurt me. And now what? You just expect me to forgive you? To forget about this? She shook her head, sobbing uncontrollably now. I don't know what I expect. I don't know what to do. I stood there, staring at her, feeling completely numb. I didn't know what to do either. I didn't know how to fix this, how to move forward. All I knew was that everything we had built, everything we had shared, was gone. There was no coming back from this. Get out, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What? She asked, looking up at me in shock. I said, get out, I repeated, louder this time. I can't look at you right now. I don't want you here. She looked like she was going to argue, but she didn't. She just grabbed her bag and left without another word, the door slamming behind her. And just like that, I was alone. Alone with the silence, alone with the realization that my marriage was over, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence after she left was unbearable. You'd think after everything that had just gone down, I'd feel something more than the numbness settling over me. Rage. Sadness. Anything. But I was blank. It was like my mind had shut down, processing everything that just happened at half speed. She was gone, and for a few minutes, I just sat there staring at the front door, waiting for her to come back, to knock, to beg for forgiveness. But she didn't. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't coming back, at least not tonight. Jenna wasn't sorry. She wasn't broken up about what she did. She was crying because she got caught, not because she felt any real guilt. I'd seen that look before, on other people, on cheaters who get called out. It's not regret. It's fear. Fear of what comes next, fear of losing what they're comfortable with. I stood up, the numbness giving way to a slow, creeping anger. Not the explosive kind, where you yell and throw things. No, this was colder, sharper. The kind that sits inside you, festering, growing by the second. She had 6 months. 6 months of lies, sneaking around, playing me for a fool. 6 months, and she'd barely given me an explanation other than she was lonely and I wasn't around enough. Bullshit, I muttered to myself, pacing the living room. Lonely? She was lonely? What about me? I was busting my ass every day, putting in long hours, trying to make sure we had a good life, that we were comfortable. Every damn decision I made was for us, and she was off screwing some guy from work, telling herself it was my fault for not being there. She thought I was blind. She thought I'd roll over, take her excuses, let her walk all over me and maybe, just maybe, we'd talk it out and everything would go back to normal. But normal was dead. Whatever we had before, that was over the second she stepped into that hotel room with another man. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not like this. I grabbed my phone and sat back down, mind racing. I knew I had to be smart about this. I couldn't just rage out and make some emotional move that would blow up in my face. I needed a plan. Something that would hit her where it hurt most. First things first, I called our bank. I had access to all our joint accounts, and if there was one thing Jenna valued just as much as her affair, it was her comfortable lifestyle. The trips, the shopping, the little luxuries she liked to indulge in, well, she wasn't going to have those anymore. Not if I had anything to say about it. The conversation with the bank rep was quick. I froze our joint accounts and transferred most of the funds into my personal account. I wasn't stupid. I left just enough so she wouldn't get suspicious right away. No sense in tipping her off too soon. But she was going to notice eventually, and when she did, it would hit her hard. Next, I went into her emails. Yeah, I'd gone through her phone, but the laptop was where she really let her guard down. Sure enough, there it was, her work emails, her personal emails, everything laid out in neat little folders. I scrolled through, finding nothing new about the affair itself, but I wasn't really looking for more proof at this point. I had all the proof I needed. What I was looking for were ways to make her life miserable without making it too obvious I was pulling the strings. Then I found it. Jenna had been planning a vacation, something big, like a tropical getaway with her friends. She hadn't mentioned it to me, probably waiting to use one of her bullshit excuses about a work retreat or some other lie she'd been feeding me. But there it was, dates, destinations, even flight details. Perfect. I logged into the airline's website, using her information, and canceled everything. Flights, hotel reservations, all of it. Gone in a few clicks. If she was going to sneak off with her friends or her little side piece, she could do it on her own dime now. No fancy vacation, no getaway. That felt good. Really good. But I wasn't done yet. Jenna had been working her way up in her company for the past couple of years, making a name for herself in the corporate world. She loved her job, and I knew it was one of the few things that gave her a sense of control. She'd told me countless times how hard she worked to get where she was, how proud she was of the progress she'd made. Well, guess what? I was about to fuck with that, too. I started searching through her work emails, looking for anything I could use. It didn't take long. She wasn't exactly careful with her conversations. There were plenty of personal exchanges with colleagues that, if taken out of context, could cause some serious problems for her. Flirty messages with a coworker, some questionable remarks about her boss, nothing too outrageous, but enough to raise some eyebrows if someone were to see them. I forwarded a few of those emails to her boss, just enough to plant the seed of doubt. No explanation, no commentary, just the emails. Let her explain herself. Let her squirm a little. Then I went to social media. Jenna was the type who liked to keep a clean, polished image online, the kind of person who posted about work achievements, charity events, yoga classes, the works. I logged into her Facebook, her Instagram, and I started going through her friends list. A lot of mutual friends, co-workers, and people from her side of the family. I didn't do anything too drastic yet. I just unfriended a bunch of people, enough to cause some confusion and make her wonder what the hell was going on. And then I waited. It didn't take long for the first text to come through. Just over an hour later, she sent me a message. "Jenna, what the hell, where's all the money?" I smiled. It had started. I didn't reply. She sent another one, this time angrier. "Jenna, I just checked our accounts, and there's barely anything left in the joint one. What's going on?" Still, I said nothing. I let her stew in it. Then came the calls. I watched my phone ring over and over, her name lighting up the screen. She was freaking out, and that was just the beginning. She probably hadn't even noticed the cancelled vacation or the forwarded emails yet. I wanted to drag this out, make her feel the anxiety, the panic of losing everything she thought she had under control. But I didn't answer the calls. I wanted her to suffer in silence for a while, let her mind go wild with all the possibilities. Let her think she was losing her grip on everything she cared about. I could almost picture her pacing around whatever apartment or hotel room she'd run off to, pulling at her hair, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. It felt good. Really good. Eventually, the texts started coming in fast. "Jenna, did you do this?" "Jenna, you've got to be kidding me, Mark." "Jenna, we need to talk. Now." I laughed when I saw that one. Talk? Now she wanted to talk? After everything she'd done? After the lies, the betrayal, the months of screwing around behind my back, now she wanted to sit down and have a conversation? Fuck that. It wasn't until she sent the next message that I felt that cold, sharp anger flare up again. "Jenna, if you don't call me back, I'm coming over." Coming over? To what? To fix things? To lie to my face again? Or maybe she thought she could somehow weasel her way out of this, convince me to drop everything and go back to the way things were before. I could feel my pulse racing, and I realized that the numbness was gone, replaced by pure, unfiltered rage. I called her back. She picked up on the first ring. "What the fuck did you do?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "What did I do?" I replied, my tone calm but cold. "You mean after I caught you screwing around behind my back for 6 months? After you lied to me, cheated on me, and destroyed our marriage? Yeah, I froze the accounts. I cancelled your vacation. I forwarded your emails. You want to know why? Because you deserve every bit of this." There was silence on the other end for a moment. I could hear her breathing, heavy and frantic. Then she snapped. "You asshole," she spat. "You can't just take everything away like that. You can't do this." "Oh, I can," I said, my voice steady. "And I did. You made your choices, Jenna. Now you get to live with the consequences." "You're ruining my life," she hissed, her voice shaking with fury. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "I'm ruining your life? You ruined your own life, Jenna. You did this. Not me." Before she could say anything else, I hung up. It felt good. No, it felt incredible. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. I'd taken back the power she'd stolen from me, and I wasn't going to stop there. I'd gotten back at Jenna, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. There was still one loose end that I had to deal with: the other guy. Her little fling from work, the one she'd been sneaking off with for 6 months. I didn't know much about him yet, but I knew enough. He was some coworker, some nobody, and Jenna had thrown everything away for him. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. He had to feel this too. I started by going through her emails again, looking for any mention of him. I didn't have his name yet, but I was going to find it. I wasn't sure if I'd see it spelled out in some romantic email or if she was smart enough to keep those communications off the work server. But I knew people, especially the arrogant ones, are sloppy. Sure enough, buried deep in one of the email chains was his name, Evan Blake. I stared at it for a moment, letting the name sink in. Evan. The guy who thought he could just waltz into my life and take what wasn't his. The guy who thought he could sleep with another man's wife and walk away clean. Well, Evan had another thing coming. I did a quick search online. It wasn't hard to find him, his LinkedIn profile popped right up. Sales executive at the same company Jenna worked at. The profile picture showed him smiling in a suit, looking like the smug prick I imagined him to be. I could feel my hands tightening around my phone, but I forced myself to stay calm. This had to be calculated. If I was going to hit him, I had to do it right. I spent the next hour digging. It was easy to piece together his life. Evan had been at the company for just over 2 years, making good money, steadily climbing the corporate ladder. Married 2 figures. I wasn't surprised. Guys like him, they always have that double life. I clicked through his social media profiles, scrolled through the pictures of his perfect little family. A wife, 2 young kids, a house in the suburbs. A normal, happy life. Well, not for long. I saved a few screenshots of his profile and a couple of pictures with his wife. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew I'd use them. This wasn't just about wrecking his career. I wanted him to feel the same burn of betrayal I'd felt. I wanted him to know what it was like to have the rug ripped out from under him. The next step was gathering more evidence. I needed to confirm that Jenna and Evan were having the affair at work, during work hours. I wanted proof that would ruin him professionally. It wasn't enough to just humiliate him. I wanted him to lose everything, the way I felt like I'd lost everything. So, I decided to head over to their office. Jenna's company wasn't far from where we lived, just a 20-minute drive. I parked down the street, close enough to see but far enough not to be obvious. The building was modern, all glass windows and steel, and I watched people coming and going, oblivious to the mess unfolding in their colleagues' personal life. For all they knew, Evan was just another guy heading off to lunch, maybe chatting with Jenna over a coffee, acting like nothing was wrong. I had my phone ready, waiting for her to step outside. It was nearly lunchtime, and I knew Jenna's routine. Sure enough, about 15 minutes later, she walked out the front doors, laughing, with none other than Evan by her side. They weren't holding hands or anything obvious, but the way they were smiling, the way they stood just a little too close, it was all I needed to see. I snapped a few photos from my car, making sure to get a clear shot of the two of them together. I didn't need anything overt, just enough to suggest something inappropriate. These would come in handy later. I followed them as they walked down the street to a nearby cafe. They sat outside, laughing and talking like they didn't have a care in the world. It made my blood boil to watch them sitting there, so casual, so comfortable. I wanted to storm over, flip the table, scream in Evan's face about what a piece of shit he was. But I didn't. This wasn't the time for that. I was building something bigger. When they finally finished their lunch, I followed them back to the office, took a few more pictures of them walking side by side, then drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. I had what I needed for now, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more. That night, I sat down at my computer and pulled up Evan's wife's Facebook page. Her name was Samantha Blake, and from the looks of it, she was just as clueless as I'd been. Her profile was filled with pictures of her family, her kids, her life with Evan. The kind of stuff that, until recently, I'd thought was real for me too. I scrolled through the happy family photos, the vacations, the birthday parties, and I felt a strange kind of satisfaction knowing that I was about to tear all of that apart. I wasn't sure if I wanted to send her the photos yet. Part of me wanted to save that move for later, once I'd done more damage to Evan's career. But I couldn't shake the idea of her finding out, the same way I had. Seeing the proof laid out in front of her, watching her whole world crash down in an instant. So, I took a chance. I created a fake email account, something generic, untraceable, and sent her the photos I'd taken that day. I kept the message short and sweet. Samantha, you don't know me, but I thought you should see these. I've recently found out that my wife and your husband, Evan, have been having an affair for 6 months. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you deserve to know the truth. A concerned party. It felt good hitting send. Really good. I wasn't sure how she'd react, but I knew I'd done something that would set the wheels in motion. I didn't have to sit around waiting for the fallout. The bomb was planted, and it was just a matter of time before it exploded. But I wasn't finished with Evan. Not yet. The next day, I dug deeper into his work connections. He wasn't just some mid-level manager, he had ambitions. His LinkedIn showed him networking with all sorts of higher-ups, people who could pull strings, make or break careers. That's where I needed to hit him. I crafted another email, this time targeting his boss and a few key people at his company's HR department. I attached the photos again, along with the screenshots I'd saved from Jenna's calendar, showing their meetings in that hotel room. The message was simple, professional even. To whom it may concern, I believe it is in the company's best interest to be aware that two of your employees, Evan Blake and Jenna, my wife, have been engaging in an inappropriate relationship during work hours. Attached are photos and evidence that suggest misconduct, which may violate company policy. I felt it was important for the organization to handle this internally before it escalates further. I hit send. Now, all I had to do was wait. The next few days were nerve-wracking, but I kept myself busy, preparing for what was to come. I knew it wouldn't take long for Evan's life to start unraveling. I didn't check my email, didn't check social media, didn't need to. I just focused on keeping myself together, knowing that every moment, his world was crumbling in the background. And then, it happened. The first sign was a call from Jenna. She was frantic. I let it go to voicemail, and when I finally listened, her voice was shaking. "Mark, you need to call me back. There's been some stuff going around at work. They know about us. Evan's in trouble. I don't know what to do. Please, just call me, okay? We need to figure this out." I didn't call her back. The next day, I heard through a mutual friend that Evan had been put on suspension at work. There was an investigation going on, and it wasn't looking good for him. Apparently, the photos and emails had done the trick. HR was all over it, and Evan was scrambling to save his job. I smiled to myself. This was just the beginning. That night, I got another message. This one wasn't from Jenna. It was from Samantha, the wife. "Who are you? How do you know about Evan and Jenna? Please, I need to know everything." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. She was me, just a few weeks behind. Her world was falling apart, just like mine had. And Evan was about to lose everything. I didn't respond right away. I wanted her to feel that same emptiness I'd felt when the truth hit me. The waiting. The confusion. The pain. Evan thought he could take what wasn't his. He thought he could sneak around, lie, and get away with it. But now? Now he was losing his job, his family, and everything he thought he could keep hidden. And I wasn't done yet. I wasn't ready when Jenna showed up at the house. It had been days since her last frantic voicemail, and I'd ignored every one of her calls, every text she sent asking me to please talk. I hadn't seen her since that night I told her to get out, and honestly, I thought I'd feel relief seeing her gone from the house. But when I opened the door and saw her standing there, my stomach clenched. She looked like hell, dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess, like she hadn't slept in days. There was no faking it this time. She wasn't angry, she wasn't defiant. She was broken. I almost shut the door right in her face. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped back, and without saying a word, I let her inside. She walked in slowly, like she was stepping into someone else's home. The house didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like a crime scene, the air thick with everything unsaid between us, with all the memories of the life we'd built together now shattered. She stopped in the living room, standing there awkwardly, glancing around like she was looking for something to hold on to. Her eyes landed on the empty space where the wedding photo used to hang. I'd taken it down the night she left, chucked it in the garage along with the rest of the framed memories I couldn't stand to look at anymore. She noticed. Her lips parted, but no words came out. It was like she was choking on her own guilt. I didn't invite her to sit. I didn't offer her a drink. I just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to speak. It took her a while, and when she finally did, her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying for days. Mark. I didn't know where else to go. I raised an eyebrow, my voice flat when I answered, "What, Evan didn't have a spare couch for you?" She winced. That hit harder than I expected. Her eyes welled up, and for a moment, I thought she might start bawling right there, but she held it in. Barely. I wasn't in the mood for tears. I wasn't in the mood for any of this. I just wanted her to leave again, to go back to wherever she'd been hiding and let me deal with this on my own. But I knew that wasn't happening. Not yet. She stepped closer, wringing her hands nervously. "I'm sorry, Mark. I know that doesn't mean much now, but I just needed to say it." "Sorry?" I echoed, shaking my head. "What the hell are you sorry for, Jenna? Sorry for getting caught? Sorry for ruining everything? Sorry for throwing away our marriage for 6 months of screwing some guy from work?" Her eyes darted to the floor, and she took a deep breath, struggling to find her words. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But it wasn't just about him." I scoffed, folding my arms tighter across my chest. "Oh, so now I get to hear the excuses? Is that it? The real reason why you decided to cheat on me?" "I didn't decide to cheat on you, Mark," she snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "It just happened." "It just happened?" I laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that? You just accidentally found yourself in a hotel room with him, over and over again? That's bullshit, Jenna, and you know it." She flinched at my words, the weight of them clearly hitting her hard. But I wasn't going to back down. I'd waited long enough to hear the truth, and I wasn't about to let her weasel out of it with some half-assed apology. "I was lonely," she said, her voice small now, barely above a whisper. "I know that sounds stupid, but you were always gone, always working, always somewhere else." I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that I'd been working for us, for our future, for everything we'd built together. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, my body rigid with anger. "You think I wasn't lonely too?" I shot back. "You think I didn't feel the distance? But I didn't run off to some hotel to screw someone else every time things got tough. That's not how this works, Jenna. Marriage isn't some fair-weather game where you get to walk away whenever you're feeling lonely." She looked at me, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, but I didn't care. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. This was her mess, and she was going to have to deal with it. "I know I can't fix this," she said, her voice shaking. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to try. I want to make things right." I laughed again, this time louder, more bitter than ever. "Make things right? How the hell do you think you're going to do that, Jenna? How do you fix this? What, you think we can just go to counseling, talk about our feelings, and pretend like none of this ever happened?" "I don't know," she cried, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to do, Mark. I'm scared, okay? I'm scared of losing you, of losing everything we've built." I shook my head, my anger boiling over. "You already lost me, Jenna. You lost me the moment you decided to cheat. There's nothing left to fix." She was sobbing now, her hands covering her face as she stood there, shaking. I should have felt something, pity, maybe even a little compassion, but all I felt was empty. Watching her cry wasn't bringing me any satisfaction, and I wasn't sure what that meant. I thought I'd feel something watching her break down, but the more I saw her like this, the more I realized how far gone we were. She wiped her eyes, trying to pull herself together. "Mark, I don't want a divorce. I don't want to lose you." I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before answering. "It's too late for that, Jenna. It's been too late for a long time." Her face crumpled, and she collapsed onto the couch, burying her head in her hands. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her, feeling a strange sense of detachment. This woman sitting in front of me, crying over what she'd lost, wasn't the same person I married. Or maybe she was, and I just hadn't seen it. Maybe this was who she'd always been, and I'd been too blinded by my own love for her to notice. "Why did you come here, Jenna?" I asked, my voice quieter now, the anger starting to fade. "What did you expect me to say?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I don't know. I wanted to talk. I wanted to try and fix things." I shook my head. "You can't fix this. Not anymore." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of everything between us hanging heavy in the air. There was no going back from this. No amount of talking, no amount of tears could change what had happened. "I think we should get a divorce," I said finally, the words coming out slowly, like they'd been stuck inside me for too long. "There's nothing left to save here, Jenna." She stared at me, her face pale, like the reality of what I'd said was just sinking in. But we can work through this, Mark. We can go to therapy, we can." "No," I cut her off, my voice firm. "I'm not going to pretend like we can go back to the way things were. I'm not going to sit in a room with you and some therapist and talk about our feelings while you keep lying to yourself. This is over, Jenna. You killed it." Her lip quivered, and for a moment, I thought she might argue again, but she didn't. She just nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." We sat there in silence again, the finality of everything settling in. I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. There was nothing left to say. We both knew this was the end. After a while, Jenna stood up, wiping her eyes one last time. "I'll call my lawyer," she said softly. We'll figure it out." I nodded, my chest tight. "Yeah. We'll figure it out." She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. Instead, she turned and walked to the door, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched her leave, the door clicking shut behind her, and I realized that was the last time we'd ever speak as husband and wife. She was gone, for good this time. And just like that, it was over. The day Jenna and I signed the divorce papers, it felt more like a formality than anything else. We sat in the office of our respective lawyers, barely exchanging glances. Everything that needed to be said had been said. The silence between us was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people have finally accepted the inevitable. There was no love left, no hatred either, just emptiness. I watched as Jenna signed her name on the dotted line, her hand trembling slightly. She looked older than she had the last time we sat together in a room like this. The stress of the last few months had taken its toll on her. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Sympathy had long since left me, replaced by a numbness that I was growing used to. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. We both did. When it was my turn, I didn't hesitate. I scribbled my name, handed the pen back to my lawyer, and leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of a decade of marriage slip away in an instant. It wasn't a relief, not exactly. It wasn't freedom, either. It was just done. And that was all I'd wanted for a while now, for it to be over. The lawyers exchanged a few final words, discussing the details of the settlement. We hadn't fought much over the material things. We both wanted it to end quickly, cleanly. The house was mine, Jenna had insisted on it. She didn't want to stay there, said it held too many memories, too much of what she'd ruined. Fine by me. I didn't have plans to stay long either. I just hadn't figured out what was next for me yet. When the meeting wrapped up, Jenna stood up slowly, avoiding my eyes. She mumbled something to her lawyer before finally turning toward me. "I guess this is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "Yeah. It is." She hesitated, like there was something more she wanted to say, but the words never came. Instead, she just looked at me, a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there the last time we talked. It wasn't the sadness of losing me, I don't think. It was the sadness of losing everything, of realizing she couldn't go back and undo what had been done. "Take care, Mark," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You too," I replied, and that was it. She walked out of the room, out of my life, and I didn't look back. There was no dramatic farewell, no lingering moment of regret. Just the quiet end to a story that had dragged on too long. After the divorce, the house felt even emptier than before. I thought maybe, once it was final, I'd feel something different. Maybe a sense of closure, maybe some kind of release. But there was none of that. The silence just hung in the air, the memories of our life together fading into the background like old photographs gathering dust on a shelf. I packed up her things first. She'd left most of her stuff behind, told me she didn't want it. Too many reminders, I guess. So I boxed it all up, not out of anger or spite, but because I needed the space. I needed to clear the house of her presence so I could figure out what my next steps were. The house had never really been a home after the affair. It was just a place we both existed in, going through the motions. Now it was mine, technically, but it didn't feel like mine. It felt like a relic of something I no longer recognized. I went through the rooms, one by one, packing up more than just Jenna's things. Old photos, gifts, souvenirs from vacations we took, all of it went into boxes. I couldn't look at any of it anymore. Not without feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. I didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew I couldn't stay there. So I put the house up for sale. It didn't take long to find a buyer, the market was good. A couple with 2 kids. They were excited about the place, talking about all the memories they'd make there. I smiled and nodded, acting like I cared. But the truth was, I was just happy to be rid of it. The sooner I left, the sooner I could start over. The day I moved out, it was raining. Typical, I thought. A perfect end to a long, miserable chapter of my life. I loaded the last of the boxes into the back of my truck, took one last look at the empty house, and locked the door behind me. I didn't feel anything as I drove away. No sadness, no regret. Just a strange, hollow kind of relief. I didn't have a destination in mind. I hadn't planned that far ahead. For weeks after the divorce, I'd been living in this strange limbo, trying to figure out what came next. Friends had offered advice: take a vacation, throw yourself into work, get back out there. But none of it appealed to me. I wasn't looking for a distraction. I was looking for a way to rebuild, to put the pieces of my life back together in a way that made sense. And then I remembered something my dad used to say when I was a kid: sometimes, you've got to strip everything down to the bones before you can build something new. It stuck with me, that idea of starting from scratch, of clearing away the debris and building something better. So that's what I decided to do. I found a small cabin upstate, nothing fancy, just a place I could rent while I figured things out. It wasn't far from the city, but far enough that I felt like I was finally getting away from everything. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't feel like explaining myself, and honestly, I needed the space. I needed time to think, to figure out what I wanted for myself now that everything was different. The cabin was quiet, peaceful even. For the first few days, I just sat on the porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, watching the rain fall in soft sheets. It felt strange at first, being so alone, but I got used to it. The quiet wasn't so bad after a while. I spent the next few weeks doing nothing, really. I went for long walks, cooked simple meals, read a few books I'd been meaning to get to. It was like hitting the reset button on my life, stripping everything down to the essentials. There was no rush, no pressure to figure out what came next. I let myself breathe for the first time in months. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the version of me that had been trapped in that miserable, crumbling marriage, but the version of me that existed before all of that. The version of me that liked being alone, that liked the quiet, that didn't need someone else to feel complete. One day, I sat down with a notebook and made a list. Not of things I needed to do, but of things I wanted to do. Things I'd forgotten about, dreams I'd set aside while I was too busy working, too busy being someone's husband. The list was simple, small even, but it felt like a start. Months passed. I found a new job, nothing flashy, just something that paid the bills. I kept the cabin for a while, long enough to get my head on straight. Friends started reaching out again, trying to get me back into the swing of things, back into normal life. I took it slow, let them pull me in gradually. It wasn't like I was suddenly over everything. There were still days when the anger crept back in, when I'd think about Jenna, about the affair, and feel that old familiar bitterness bubbling up inside me. But those days became fewer and farther between. The more time I spent focusing on myself, the less I thought about her, about what had happened. The less I cared. One night, I sat on the porch of the cabin, looking up at the stars, and realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Jenna, not at Evan, not even at myself. I didn't feel anything. I'd moved on, not in a dramatic, life-changing way, but in the slow, quiet way that happens when you stop holding on to the past. I was ready to start again. Ready to rebuild. And so I did. I don't know where life's going to take me from here. I don't have a grand plan, no big dreams of a perfect future. But I'm okay with that. For the first time in a long time, I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with the uncertainty, with the idea that I can take my time, figure things out as I go. And that's enough for now.